Joseph Stalin. The official story is that Joseph Stalin, the man of steel, died from a stroke. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the most powerful man in the Soviet Union didn't just die, but was allowed to die by his own inner circle? They watched as a tyrant who terrorized a nation for decades took his final breaths. It's March 1st, 1953. The air in Moscow is thick with paranoia, a feeling Stalin himself had perfected. The absolute ruler of the Soviet Union had just spent the night doing what he always did, entertaining his closest cronies at his private house, just outside the city. This inner circle included some of the most feared men in the country. They watched a movie, they ate, they drank, and in the early hours of the morning, they finally leave. The aging dictator goes to bed. But the next day, there's a strange silence. Stalin, a man of a rigid routine, doesn't emerge. He doesn't call for his tea. The guards, conditioned by years of absolute terror, are too scared to check in on him. To disturb Stalin without being summoned could easily be a death sentence, and so they wait, for hours and hours. The most powerful man on earth is completely left alone. His condition is a total mystery. Finally, late that evening, a guard works up the courage to go in. He finds Stalin on the floor, barely conscious, lying in a pool of his own urine. He'd had a massive stroke. In any normal situation, you would expect a frantic call for the best doctors, but this was anything but a normal situation. Instead of getting help, the guard calls the inner circle. It takes hours before Bernia and the others show up, and even longer before the doctors are finally summoned to the scene. This delay probably wasn't an accident. The Kremlin was still in the grip of the doctors' plot, a completely fabricated conspiracy in which Stalin had accused the top physicians of being assassins. With the country's best doctors arrested and tortured, even Stalin's own men were hesitant to call for medical help, a hesitation that also served their own ambitions quite well. When doctors finally arrive, the scene is grim. Stalin is paralyzed and his breathing is labored. But it's the behavior of Lavrenti Bernia that, according to some accounts, is the most disturbing. Nikita Khrushchev later wrote in his memoirs that Bernia was spewing hatred and mocking the dying dictator. But then, the moment when Stalin seemed to regain consciousness, Bernia would repeatedly drop to his knees, grab Stalin's hand, and kiss it, declaring his loyalty. A far more dramatic, though likely untrue story claims that Bernia later boasted to his colleagues, "I did him in. I saved you all." While there's no real proof he ever said that, it's clear that Bernia was planning his next moves. While Stalin was lying dead, Bernia was securing his own power, setting the stage for a struggle that would follow the dictator's death. The official cause of death was a cerebral hemorrhage, also known as a stroke. For a 74-year-old man with a history of high blood pressure, this was entirely plausible. But when the full autopsy report was revealed decades later, it contained some curious details. It mentioned not just a brain hemorrhage, but also bleeding in his stomach and intestines before he died. And it was reported that Stalin was vomiting blood, a symptom that isn't typical in most stroke cases. This has led some to float a more sinister theory: poison, specifically a tasteless, colorless anticoagulant like warfarin, which is used as rat poison. In theory, warfarin could cause the exact kind of systematic bleeding found in Stalin's body, triggering a stroke, while also causing other internal hemorrhages. Slipped into his wine during that final dinner, it could have been the perfect assassination weapon. However, most medical experts and historians today believe that this theory is highly unlikely. They argued that the immense physical trauma from a massive hypertensive stroke can in fact explain all the symptoms noted in the autopsy, including the stomach bleeding. This mix of political ambition, medical mystery, and betrayal sits right at the darkest hearts of our modern history. If you find these hidden stories as fascinating as I do, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any more of our deep dives.